Hello and welcome back to another episode of Your Drone Questions Answered. I'm John Dickow with the Drone Launch Academy, here to find the answers to your drone questions. These are questions that you yourself submit. And so today's question's a good one. It was clearly around the 4th of July time, so we're about a month off from this, but I think it's still relevant. What are some tips for shooting drone video at night? And this person particularly would like to know, how do you reduce graininess when you're shooting video at night? So I'm welcoming back Dave Downey. He is the Senior Event Specialist at BCC Live. That's Boulder County Communications. They're based in the Denver area. They do really great work out there. We've talked to Dave before doing big events, how to shoot video, a live event with a drone. Welcome back, Dave, for coming back to answer this question.
Yeah, it's great to be back. Thanks for having us back.
So I'm going to kind of give you an opportunity, introduce yourself again to our audience. Just tell us a little bit more about what BCC Live does.
Yeah, so we specialize in live broadcasting. So we're a full production studio, cameras, switchers, and then broadcasting out to the internet or TV stations. And most of it's sporting events, but where it relates to drones is more and more we're depending on drones to get the footage that we need. So to cover a sporting event, in fact, we recently have started doing soccer and we hover a drone above the field for 2/3 of the game. It gives us a good fallback if our cameras aren't in a good position. So we're more and more and more relying on drones for our live production at BCC Live.
Awesome, awesome. And I would recommend to our audience, find that episode. It was about earlier this year in 2024. We had Dave on talking about live events, using drones as that secondary fallback camera. Really interesting stuff. It's wild how much drones are being used in everyday production. But let's get into the meat of this particular question, shooting drone video at night. Now, this is different from a topic that we had talked about a couple weeks ago, I think, when it was what are the rules around shooting video at night? Now, this is about shooting quality video at night. And so, Dave, you obviously have some experience with it. And so I'm going to kind of throw it to you, let you give us sort of your top tips there. And then we can talk maybe a little bit more about the graininess issue.
We do fly drones at night and we won't talk about all the procedural things, but you do need to have a strobe, a collision strobe, which is a light on your drone. And the reason I bring that up, even though you say we've talked about this, is
Mhm.
that can show up in your footage if you're flying at haze or fog or clouds or anything like that. That strobe will show up in your footage because it's a blinking light, a really bright one at that. I think it's supposed to be visible at 3 miles, 2 miles, a long distance. So it's really bright. So that's one thing to consider is that strobe is going to show up in your footage. But what we're talking about is, and everybody has this problem, short of the people with very expensive drones, is the drones that a lot of us fly are considered prosumer drones. And we talked about this. That's what we fly for live production is mini threes and mini fours. And they just don't have the sensor size to get good quality footage at night. I'm not going to say it's hopeless. You're up against the science of the sensor and stuff like that.
Mhm.
There is some things that we can do. And like I said, we fly drones at night, those mini threes, those mini fours, which I don't love the term prosumer because we're professionals. It's the drone we've chosen to use for a financial reason and stuff like that. But the biggest tip I can give somebody is if you're flying at night, shoot something that's lit. So, for example, we were in Lake Placid, New York a week ago, and there's a speed skating oval, and we cover finishes there. And because it's lit, we're able to shoot it at night and not get grainy footage because the oval is lit. So
Mhm.
find things like city lights and things like that to shoot at night. If you were to go try to shoot the horizon at night, like up in the mountains, unfortunately, with any of the prosumer drones, you're going to get some grain. So figure out how to get that lit. A couple tricks are dusk and dawn, flying away from the sunrise or sunset. You can get that. It looks like night, but it really isn't. And in post, you could even bring down some of the exposure to make it even darker. And so that's a really easy trick is to shoot, for lack of a better term, like gray light, like dusk or dawn, and then bring the exposure down. That'll leave all the grain out, but it'll make it look like night. But more importantly, just what are you shooting? So for us, it's sports. So a lot of these sporting events take place at night. And if they're out on the road at night, and there's no lights, I don't think waste your time with a prosumer drone. Wait till they're going under a street light or something like that and get down a little bit lower. So if the street light's, 10 meters high, I want to fly at like 15 meters, 20 meters to get that person at night. So that's a really big helper is shoot things at night or bring down the exposure in post to make it look like night. I'm a big fan of full auto, and a lot of people would be like, that's not the best way to shoot at night. But like again, we talked about this street light. So we're the street light's out of the frame, so it's really dark, and then it's in the frame. It all happens too fast for me to change the settings on my drone. So I'm a big fan of full auto at night and shooting lit things, as I've mentioned. Now, if you're like, hey, I'm super pro and I have to, maybe what you do happens at night all the time.
Yeah.
You're going to have to move up to a drone with like a 1 inch sensor or something bigger. The Mavic 3 Cinna, that would be a good choice of a drone that would do okay at night, not great. Or, and again, now we're talking about money I won't even spend on drones, but Sony has a drone, the Airpeak, and then you can put a like DSLR bodied camera on there, like A7S3, which is a handheld camera that sees at night. I mean, it literally sees at night. So if you wanted but now we're talking 15 grand as
Yeah.
opposed to the drones that a lot of us fly that are under $1,000. I'm not a big fan of going above $1,000 on our drones because they crash. Things happen. I mean,
Yeah.
things happen. So there are things you could do with money to get an Inspire 3 would be a drone that has got a 1 inch sensor. It would shoot good at night, but with your prosumer drones, shoot things that are lit at night. I know we mentioned around the 4th of July. So fireworks, they're lit, but the ground is going to be grainy, but the fireworks themselves most likely won't be. But also be careful if you're going to shoot fireworks that the people shooting off the fireworks know that you're there because they'll stop a fireworks display if you're flying your drone up in the fireworks. We did get the opportunity in New York last week at a fireworks display to fly one of our Mini 2s, which now we're talking much less expensive, up into the fireworks displays. But we communicated with the operators of the fireworks. They knew the drone was going to be there. And it came out pretty good. We're talking about a drone that only shoots 1080, and it came out pretty good and not super grainy. But again, back to my original tip, we're shooting light. We're
Yeah.
shooting at light. Going and trying to shoot the forest or something like that, you got to spend the money on an expensive drone with an expensive sensor.
I really appreciate you kind of laying it out that way, just knowing who our audience is, a community of people kind of in the earlier stages of being drone pilots and applying that to business. And so it's really, I think those tips are super valuable, but also just knowing that it is possible to buy something, to spend a lot of money, and maybe one day you'll get there. I'll also echo your comments about letting people know, especially you're doing something like shooting, capturing fireworks with your drone, letting people know. And again, there's steps you have to take in order to do that safely. And so I'll again sort of pitch our prior episode of the rules around flying your drone at night. Check that out, please. Dave, I've got one question for you because in our forum, kind of where this is in the Drone Launch Connect community where this question popped up, there was a comment where keeping the ISO close to 100 would be helpful. Is that something you would agree, or is that kind of something where it's sort of like, yeah, maybe a little bit, but not so much as when it comes to shooting light?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're an experienced photographer or videographer or even just dronographer, whatever you want to call it,
Mhm.
then yes, bringing that ISO and bringing it down or experimenting with it, that's going to go a long ways. Where I struggle personally with like setting it at an ISO is a
Mhm.
lot of my shots are very fluid. I'm not shooting the moon. I'm shooting a person running or on a bike or something like that. And so it's so fluid that I got to go back in post. But you brought me to the biggest thing is just practice. Like, don't go out on the money shoot where you're getting paid or where it's important to you to capture it properly and
Mhm.
get surprised by full auto didn't work, 100 ISO didn't work, 10,000 ISO didn't work, whatever that may be. Go out and experiment with it. Everything you're going to hear us say is what I call test flight. If tomorrow night it's happening on this street, tonight I'm going to go out there, I'm going to test it tonight and see what it looks like, take my footage back. You're only going to learn so much from your controller. You got to dump that footage. You got to get it onto your laptop or even a big production monitor and then make the decisions on where to go. And so maybe go out and shoot some full auto and shoot some custom settings and then bring that footage back into the studio, which again, when we say studio, a lot of times is like the front seat of a car, and put
Mhm.
it on a laptop and look at it. But don't depend too much on your controller display or your iPhone display. They're somewhat deceptive. Like everything looks good on my controller. I come home and say, I nailed that. And then I see it's out of focus or something
Mhm.
like that.
Yeah. No, that's really great advice, and it also just recognizes that every situation's different. Whether you're shooting something still, you're shooting something moving, what time of night is it? Every drone's a little bit different, and so it really is kind of knowing your drone, knowing your editing software, knowing when the situation in the field, and so all those things really matter, and I think speaks to your point of practice. Figure it, to put the time in to figure it out.
Let me give you a good example of practice that I kind of learned the hard way. It was at a bicycle event, and my job was to shoot people coming down the street and around this corner. And I looked at the street in the corner and said, I got this. I'm a competent pilot. I was a little taken back by the speed on race day, and it probably took half the event for me to really nail it. And if I'd gone out there the day before and just practiced, I would have nailed the very first few shots. So I can't emphasize enough. I have hundreds of hours of professional drone flying a month, and practice is still like necessary for every shoot.
Will that ever change, because things are always
Oh,
getting updated and evolving, and so that's kinda part of your craft is you're always, needing to keep up with everything, so well, Dave, this has been great, super helpful to our audience. I wanna just kinda throw one more question out there before we wrap up, and it's a question I've asked you before, but I think it's kinda relevant even to this topic as our pilots in the DLA community try things. What advice would you have for any beginner drone pilot, whether they're looking to monetize their skill or not, try new stuff with their drone, such as flying at night?
yeah. I mean, that's you just said it. Like, just get out there and do it. It's progress over perfection. It's going out there and trying it and learning. I'm a novice pilot when it comes to FPV. I'm learning every day about FPV from very beginner, and now I'm a little bit past beginner, but I'm practicing, and eventually I'm going to be ready to FPV professionally. But it's just get out there and put in the time. I mean, it should be easy because it's fun. And
Mhm.
so if it's not fun, then, maybe it's not, there's a difference between fun and making money. So you got to find that happy medium, but just get out there and spend the time, log those hours. Like
Yeah.
if you're using DJI, the controller is going to tell you the hours you flew. And I think that's really interesting amongst our team here at BCC Live is we all go, "Oh, look how many hours I flew. Look how many hours I flew." It really shows our best pilots have the most hours.
Absolutely, and you said it. I think you said the word fun, and when I think about the drone community, anybody who decides to get in it, the common denominator is fun. Is using this new, really cool piece of technology and applying it to so many industries and parts of life, and so that's special. I'm glad you were able to kinda give us that, and Dave, I really appreciate you coming on again. Dave Downey, again, Senior Event Specialist at BCC Live, that's Boulder County Communications. BCCLiveProductions.com is where you can find all their work. Check out their portfolio. They've done some really cool stuff, live events, big time events, sporting events. It's awesome. So please check them out. And hey, if you got a drone question you'd like us to answer, please put it out there. You can submit your drone question over ydqa.io. We'll see it there. Or if you're part of the Drone Launch Connect community, that's actually where this question came through. Great community. A lot of people asking questions, answering each other's questions, sharing wins, sharing losses, sharing drones. Type your question in there. We'll see it. We will answer it. Until then, we'll see you in the sky.